Why do tennis balls have fuzzy surfaces? The strange science behind the fuzz. Imagine this. You're sitting courtside at Wimbledon. The crowd silent, the players focused, and the ball bright neon, fuzzy, almost soft-looking, cuts through the air at over 130 miles per hour. The racket strikes it, and tiny fibers fly off like sparks. It is such a common sight in tennis that most people never stop to wonder. Why on earth is the tennis ball fuzzy? Why not smooth? Why not rubber, like most balls? Why not leather, like earlier sports? And why that specific felt that looks like someone glued tiny hairs all over the surface? Today, we're diving into the surprisingly scientific, surprisingly ancient, and surprisingly weird history behind the fuzzy tennis ball beaks. This little yellow puffball has a story far bigger than it looks. Let's rewind. Before tennis courts echoed with the sound of ball and racket, the earliest ancestors of tennis were played in medieval Europe. Back then, the balls weren't fuzzy at all. In fact, they barely resembled the tennis balls we know today. Some were made of leather stuffed with hair, wool, even chopped up rags. Others were wrapped in cloth and tightly stitched. They were heavy, unpredictable, and honestly dangerous. Imagine playing a sport where a leather sack filled with animal hair is being launched at your face. Not exactly Wimbledon elegant. As the game evolved into real tennis in the 16th century on, indoor version played in royal courts, the balls became more refined. Steel no fuzz, steel no felt. But at least they were uniform. The problem, they didn't bounce consistently. You might hit one ball and it would leap like a rabbit. Hit another, and it would barely hop. Players complained constantly about how impossible it was to master the game without a predictable bounce. Then came the 1800s, and everything changed. Rubber was invented, and with it came modern sports. Suddenly, you could make a hollow rubber ball that bounced predictably. Tennis jumped outdoors. Grass courts appeared. Rackets were redesigned. The game was transformed, but a new problem appeared almost immediately. Smooth rubber balls were too powerful, too fast, and completely uncontrollable. They skidded across grass like skipping stones. Their bounce was too lively, and players struggled to control spin. What tennis gained in energy, it lost in precision. So early makers tried wrapping the rubber in cloth. Better. Then they tried wool. Even better. Eventually, they discovered that a woven felt usually wool mixed with nylon gave the perfect balance of grip, drag, and durability. And so, the fuzz was born. But here's the twist. The fuzz wasn't added for style or softness. It was added for aerodynamics. Yes, the same science that shapes airplanes, rockets, Formula One cars, and fast-moving projectiles also influences the tennis ball. The fuzzy surface dramatically changes how the ball moves through the air. When a tennis ball flies, air crashes into it. If the ball were perfectly smooth, air would flow over it too quickly, making it fly faster and reducing the control a player has on it. The fuzz, however, creates what's called a boundary layer of turbulence. That turbulence slows the ball down, stabilizes its path, and makes its spin behave in predictable ways. Think of the fuzz as tiny breaks, thousands of microscopic air-resisting bumps, working together to keep the ball playable. Without the fuzz, professional tennis would be chaos. But the fuzz doesn't just slow the ball down. It also interacts with the racket strings. When a player slices, topspans, or curves the ball, those fibers grip the strings and enhance the rotational force. A smooth ball couldn't curve nearly as dramatically. Rafael Nadal's vicious topspans. Novak Djokovic's razor sharp slices. Maria Sharapova's powerful flat shots all rely on the fuzz. In other words, the modern style of tennis isn't just about fitness, strength, or strategy. It's about the physics built into a little yellow sphere. You've probably noticed something else. The fuzz isn't just fuzzy. It's directional. Run your fingers along a tennis ball and you will feel that the fibers lie in one direction more than the other. This is intentional. When the ball is manufactured, the felt is cut into two dumbbell-shaped pieces, stretched and glued onto the rubber core. This creates seams carefully aligned for balance and aerodynamics. Even more fascinating, the fuzz slowly blooms as the ball is used. After a few games, you'll notice the fibers fluff up. That fluff increases drag even more, slowing the ball further. But after too much playing, the fibers begin to wear off. The ball speeds back up, and it loses control. That's why professional tournaments replace tennis balls every 9 games. Yes, 9. The fuzz matters that much. But what about color? You might have seen old tennis photos where the balls look white. Before 1972, that's exactly what tennis balls were, white, or sometimes black, depending on the surface. But with the rise of televised matches, broadcasters complained that white balls were nearly invisible on color TV. The solution: a color called optic yellow, now iconic worldwide. It wasn't chosen for tradition, style, or aesthetics. It was chosen because it popped best on television screens. Another fun twist: about 20% of recreational players still call the ball green, but scientifically, its official color is optic yellow. So between ancient stuffed balls, rubber revolutions, aerodynamic physics, and TV visibility tests, the fuzzy tennis ball we know today is actually the product of centuries of refinement, a tiny engineering marvel disguised as a toy. But here is the most astonishing part. The fuzz also determines how far a ball can travel at competitive altitudes. At high elevation tournaments like those in Mexico City, the air is thinner, meaning tennis balls move faster. To fix this, tennis organizations use 2 types of balls: regular duty and high-altitude balls. The difference, you guessed it, the fuzz. High-altitude balls use denser felt for extra drag. The fuzz literally changes with geography. So the next time you pick up a tennis ball, don't see it as a simple sports accessory. See it as a tiny aerodynamic masterpiece, a micro-engineered object designed to behave consistently across speed, spin, altitude, and weather conditions. A product shaped by medieval courts, Victorian rubber factories, physics labs, television studios, and decades of scientific testing. It looks soft, it feels harmless, but its design is the secret behind one of the world's most dynamic sports. The fuzz is the reason a tennis match is a chess game instead of a chaotic carnival. It's why, when a player steps onto the court, they can predict how the ball will respond to every swing, serving speed, and spin. In fact, if you removed the fuzz today, the entire sport would collapse. Strategies would fail, rallies would shorten, players would struggle to control even basic shots. Tennis would become something else entirely: fast, unpredictable, and nearly unplayable at professional levels. That's the power of the fuzz. A seemingly simple design detail has shaped the strategy, physics, and global appeal of one of the most beloved sports in history. So next time you hear that satisfying thump of a tennis ball hitting the court, remember, what you're hearing isn't just rubber and felt. It's hundreds of years of innovation, a story of physics and engineering, and the remarkable journey of a ball that learned to fly better by growing a coat of fuzz.